Hi, everyone, and good evening. Thanks so much for joining the SCS Alumni Panel. My name is Polkita, and I am from the Alumni Association Board, and I am so stoked for this event. To all of our panelists, we really appreciate you taking the time to be joining us this evening. And to all of our attendees, we're so excited to host you. The idea for this panel really stemmed from our desire to help show you the postgraduate possibilities that exist with a CMU CS degree. So we decided to invite alumni speakers here from a very diverse set of industries, including space exploration, finance, big data, national defense, and more, to help demonstrate the options available to all of you in the years to come. This event was a joint effort across the Alumni Association Board and the School of Computer Science. For those of you who may not know, the Alumni Association Board is a group of dedicated, hardworking, and most importantly, fun group of volunteers with a broad range of college and departmental affiliations, class years, and locations. We work closely with the Office of Alumni Relations to help develop and strengthen programs that connect alumni to CMU and to each other. We're really excited to be hosting this event with this incredible group of panelists that are pioneers in their fields, some true brilliant minds that took their CMU degrees and conquered their verticals. Before I introduce our next speaker, just a quick few housekeeping notes. All attendees are muted and will stay muted throughout the duration of the event. Mark Stehlik, who will be our moderator for this evening, will be taking questions after the first part of our moderated panel. But please feel free to place your questions in the chat box at any time. We really hope to get as many of your questions as possible. Now, passing it on to the man that heads it all. My pleasure to introduce all of you to Chris Stengel, the president of the Alumni Association Board.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Very excited. I was actually going to say stoked, but Pokita took my word. So I'll just level out it. Very excited and happy to see everybody here. This is a great event. I'm really looking forward to it. Just want to introduce myself and say welcome. I'm Chris Stengel. I'm actually, as you can tell by my indicia, I'm actually a CS grad, but from way back in the day. But as you'll see, computer science grads don't age. So you've got that going for you right off the bat. I took a rather twisted and strange career path to land where I am today. As a director of technology for a school district outside of Pittsburgh. But I have to say that even though I had great supports at the time, I would have loved to have an event like this available to me. And so I'm really psyched that everybody here tonight has a chance to be a part of this event. I always stayed connected to Carnegie Mellon, and I hope you all do too. And that's actually what led me to being on the board. So, find that thing that keeps you connected and keep coming back. And we hope to see you. So thanks again for being here. Thanks to the School of Computer Science. Thanks to Polkita and the rest of the alumni board for putting this thing together. I'm hoping it's the first of many great such events. But really what I want to do is introduce a man who was my advisor. Now, unfortunately, he was only like 15 years old at the time. So don't think him so old because he was my advisor, but very excited to introduce Mark Stehlik tonight as our moderator and also as the recipient of a Carnegie Mellon Alumni Association Board Faculty and Staff Impact Award winner. A very prestigious award given to him in 2017, I believe. So Mark has done amazing, great things for the alumni base and continues to do so, especially tonight. So thanks again, Mark, for all of your time and efforts tonight, and welcome. And there's your introduction. Mark, take it away.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris. If I was 15 when I was advising you, I'm not quite sure how old that might make you because you graduated 20 years ago. But anyway, it is really cool to be part of this panel experience and to try to help connect alumni in a different way to current students. Part of my job at CMU is to run the undergraduate program in CS, as many of you know, and I do that now. I've done so for the last couple of years. I used to do it before I went to Qatar 5 years ago. And I've graduated a lot of alumni, over 3,000 now, But alumni are always asking me, how can we connect back to CMU in ways that don't involve money? I'll be blunt. And this is one of those ways, right? It's a great way to get students and alumni together in a mechanism and venue that doesn't involve, anything other than trading information about what it's like to have been a computer science student, what it's like to be a computer scientist out in the world, which is where many of you are heading, in the not too distant future. So having said all of that, I am now going to introduce each of the 5 panelists, and then we'll be on to some interesting questions, hopefully. So the first is Ashwin Gupta, and each of them will be able to say like a sentence or two about themselves. So Ashwin.
Thanks, Mark. Ashwin Gupta here. It's great to meet you all. I graduated from the CS program in 2006. Immediately from graduation, went to Goldman Sachs, initially in a programming role, and then made the move into an investing role where we invest in technology companies. I now head one of the investing groups there, focused on financial technology companies. Met my wife from Carnegie Mellon. We're now married, live in Brooklyn with 2 kids, so maybe Mark will advise, 18 years hence. But great to be with you all, and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, great. Next up is Anirduh Koul.
Hey everyone, Anirduh Koul here, graduated from SCS in 2012. It's been a time. So I was formerly at Microsoft Research and now at Pinterest as an AI scientist. I also run a citizen science program for NASA, where actually 9 people from Carnegie Mellon first year are actually participants in that. So that's exciting. And also run CMU's Robo Race team, where we get to race things. And fun fact, talking about Carnegie Mellon, is I'm also a Batman movie extra, which I discovered this week. But after mistakenly, YouTube showed me a recommendation because it was shot at Carnegie Mellon. So that's it.
Great, thanks. Next up is Prashanth Mekala.
My name is Prashanth Mekala. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon in 1999 with a degree in chemical engineering, and then came back again and graduated from the Heinz School in 2016 with a degree in information technology. I currently work at American Family Mutual Insurance based in Madison, Wisconsin, and the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer working on cybersecurity efforts. Prior to that, I spent 16 years at the FBI, and my last role was as the Assistant Special Agent in charge of our counterintelligence and cyber program here in New York City. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and a fun fact is Ashwin and I, our kids both go to daycare together. So
cool. Next up is Emily Newman, who holds a particularly special place in my heart because I taught Emily 15112 back in the day.
Yes, I highly recommend it too. It's a great class. In any case, I'm Emily. I graduated from SCS in 2019. Pretty much since then, I've been working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I currently work as a software engineer, and I'm also I was actually on the EDL operations team, so I was on site for the Mars 2020 rover landing that happened a couple months ago now, a few weeks ago, long time ago. I also am a rover planner in training, which for the other rover, Curiosity, which means that I work on creating the sequences that are executed on the rover on Mars. Other than that, I play a lot of video games, and I live in Pasadena, California.
Great. And then the last of our panelists is Margaret Shervish, who also holds a special place in my heart because she was the inaugural winner of the Mark Stehlik, not that I should tout myself, Introductory in Service Teaching Award, because it was all Margaret. She was head TA for 15112 and was awesome.
Thank you. I think the award is actually right behind me in this room. So I'm Margaret. I graduated in 2013, studied computer science with a double major in math. After graduation, I joined a small software company working on data analytics software. We were acquired by MasterCard about 5 years ago. So I'm currently a software engineer at MasterCard, and I'm calling in from Fairfax, Virginia.
Great. Okay, so the plan at this point is we have some number of questions sort of in the hopper, if you will, and I'm going to throw them out to the panelists and ask them to respond. And then my hope is that you will contribute questions that we can use as we go past our half hour of, if you will, pre-submitted questions. So the first question to the panel is, what are one or more ways in which your undergrad experience at CMU has shaped who you are today, whether that's a personal issue or a professional issue. And don't make me call on you, but I will.
I'll start. Well, personally, it's easy. My wife was from Carnegie Mellon. It wouldn't have mattered if I didn't go there. So that's fairly straightforward, and that changed a lot. Professionally, and I think everyone will speak to this. Whether you're doing something in programming or technology or not, classes like I hated it at the time, but 251 and 213 and algorithms, which I can't remember the number for that anymore, but they teach you how to think. Thank you, 451. They teach you how to think, and that's been incredibly valuable. A lot of my job is you meet a company, very little about the company. You're obviously trying to figure out whether you want to invest in that company, and you have to kind of break down the problem in its discrete paths and figure out what assumptions are valid, what assumptions are not valid. And it's incredible how valuable the education was to be able to do that. So that's my take.
Okay, get another volunteer.
Yeah, I can go. So as Mark mentioned, I was the head TA for 15112 in my senior year. So that's my answer to the question. And I think something I want to call out about that is the first semester that I did it, it didn't go that well. I came in, I had never worked with most of the other TAs before, and I came in thinking that everyone was just going to be as excited as I was to be there, and it was all going to go smoothly, just like I had seen it go in the past, without realizing the hard work that my previous head TAs had put into to make it go that smoothly. So I learned a lot about myself as a leader, as an organizer, and as a teammate. And as I've led engineering teams in my career, I definitely try to put in that work up front and take the lessons that I learned from that college experience, and has been super helpful as a leader in industry as well.
Anybody else want to respond to this prompt? If not, I've got another one in the wings. Okay, so I want to follow up on Ashwin's remarks because he talked about a love-hate relationship in particular with one class, and so I'm wondering what were your favorite classes at CMU, and if there were any classes that you sort of wished you had taken in retrospect now that you've been out a couple of years. Is there something you wished you had done prior to now knowing what you know, being out in industry for a while?
So I'd say, so I loved algorithms. I hated 251. It's the only C I've gotten in my life, by the way, if you must know. I think I appreciated it more, like a wine sort of 10 years afterwards than maybe during the formation of it. In terms of, what actually, in hindsight, I wish I would have taken more non-CS classes, to be honest. Like, I am a big history buff. I was a big history buff. It would have been a perfect opportunity to, go across the cut and take some classes at the HNSS school. And, if you just take it for granted, you can just attend a class and you realize when you graduate, you just don't have the opportunity to do that. And so, I wish I'd have taken more history classes, but certainly on the computer science side, it played a very formative role in what I do today.
I can go. So I took enough classes, but I actually was auditing the same number of classes. So I would just sit in the back of class and just keep hearing people. Interestingly, if you go to the school where Tipper School, essentially, you get a pass as a visitor's pass where you can sit inside at the back of the class, as a visitor to see what the environment here is and all. And I'd basically play that game and sit in many of their classes. And then I found another person doing the same thing and we became the best of friends. But that got me into business plan competitions and things in which, an introvert like me has no reason to be there thinking about not technology, but will this actually become viable, which kind of has really influenced my career. Some two other interesting classes. One of them was a natural language processing class, where there were no presentations. They were actually they will give you a pamphlet that you cannot actually share. You have to attend the class to get that pamphlet. And ironically, this weekend, I had an assignment in work where the solution was something that I had solved in an assignment 10 years back. And I was looking around and I literally found this packet hidden called NLP with the solutions to my work problem literally written on the sheet. So that was like influencing work from 10 years back. And because I had the code, it just ran. And finally, just to take a step out, I took a juggling class. And something, just I was like terrible at it, but sure, I figured out how to, juggle 2 to 3 balls. And then 10 years later, my instructor is a HoloLens principal scientist now. And I saw her on stage with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella juggling demos. That's a good story.
I have an answer to this as well. I guess my favorite classes at CMU were by far, in a way, my robotics classes. I did a robotics additional major, so I took around 10 robotics classes in addition to all the CS classes, and they were really interesting. It was a really great way to apply like CS knowledge to something that's real, and all of the knowledge became super relevant at my real job now. I mean, being that I work in like space robotics, but I've used the knowledge, like especially about frame transformations, and I've like consulted my intro to kinematics notes multiple times in order to actually like solve frame transformation problems at work. And now that I'm like doing things with the rover, it's really helpful to have that background knowledge of robotics to like come back on, because I like know all the basic things that are involved with dealing with a robot. So also those like I wish I had taken more. I would have taken all robotics classes only if I could have. They were really cool, and yeah, they were really relevant in my job. So
Great. So a couple things. One is, Ashwin, the students in this room are going to think that I planted you for that answer, because that's always been my mantra as an advisor, right? Take things outside the major because it's your last chance to do things that are in some sense completely independent of your career path. And so I think that was wonderful. And Anirduh, there will be a post-graduation tuition charge for all those classes that you sat in surreptitiously. I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, so we've talked at sort of one end of the journey here, which is sort of the curricular space in your favorite classes. But now I want to move to the opposite end. So, and that sort of turns on what you do or how you think about what you want to do when you leave. So the question is, how do you evaluate potential employers? Do you base your decision on where to go and what to do on their vision, your vision, the particular group that you were going into, corporate culture, any or all of the above? And maybe I'm going to lob this one to Prashanth first, because you've actually got 2 degrees from CMU, and you may have an interesting perspective because they're somewhat orthogonal as to what made you think about a second degree and how your career choices might have been influenced by that.
Yeah, when it came to why I returned back to Carnegie Mellon the second time was really because of a need to fulfill a gap in my skills when I made the transition from working on traditional counterintelligence cases at the FBI. So back in 2012, I was asked to move over into our cyber division, in which we would now be pursuing that were hacking into computer networks across the world. And so once I arrived into my group, which is a group that was focused on the Middle East and Africa areas, I realized that there was a skills gap, and I needed to quickly shore up my skills relative to my peers over at the NSA, the CIA, and the Department of Defense. And so there's an opportunity that was sponsored through the FBI to go back to school at Carnegie Mellon, and I leveraged that opportunity. And what it did do is it allowed me to take new skills while I was working full time, and then put me in a position ultimately to make me a competitive candidate for my current role working in cybersecurity. So it really did help me pivot from one particular field to another rather seamlessly.
So Emily, I think I know why you ended up where you ended up, because you wanted to go to JPL like from the moment you arrived at CMU, if I recall correctly.
I'm pretty sure I came into your office like freshman fall and was like, I want to end up at JPL.
I
Help me do
remember that
that.
conversation.
No, my decision was mostly based on a matter of I love space and I love robots, and this is the place that does both, and they do it the best. So like this is pretty much, I mean, it's the best place to work for if you love space and robots. But at the same time, like I also interned at JPL after my freshman year, and I worked with my now he's my manager. He was my manager then too. His name is Mark. But so well, also Mark, but spelled with a C. But so yeah, I actually worked with him after my freshman year, and I like thought he was a great manager. So it was also good to know that I was going back to like work for somebody I actually enjoyed working for, and that I would have like a supportive manager in my like fresh out of college job. And like the fact that it happened to be at the place that I wanted to work for the most ever was an additional bonus.
I can go next. So I can answer more from that Silicon Valley or the big tech side of things. So most of my peers in my class, they were. I was the last person to get recruited from my class, and students were getting recruited like they were like fresh into the program, and I don't know. I was like, how are they? Like I actually really need to prepare here. So I think my usual advice is that a place where you can learn and grow would triumph more than your compensation package that you'd get, because at the start of your career, it does not matter. It's going to be change when you compare to if you're actually highly skilled, what you can potentially do. So you want to get somewhere where you can learn enough and have the opportunity to take the opportunity and to actually make an impact. So when you go through your career and go to any interview, what they really measure you with is what impact have you made so far? What impact have you made in your last role? And that impact factor is what eventually decides your compensation and all, everything level setting that happens. So the better an opportunity you get to grow, the better it gets. So sometimes like it beats branding also. So I would say that, when you can take that risk, startup is a great way where you have to wear so many hats, you have to get everything done. It's a little stressful, but that risk can pay off in your skill set growth because, you have to do everything there. That's one example. For me personally, it was like, where can I get data of different sorts? I don't know what I'll do with it, but that ended up being like a major playing factor. And I ended up going to Microsoft. So that's how I would say.
So Margaret, you took a bit of a leap of faith going to APT, and it's sort of morphed in your time there. You want to take a stab at this one?
Yep, sure. So APT, when I interned after my sophomore year, was a company of about 20, maybe 25 engineers. I just connected with them during career fairs on campus. And when it came time to make the decision of where to go that summer, I was deciding between some big names and APT. My family and everybody that knew me well was recommending that I go to this smaller place. Everybody that didn't know me that well was, of course, saying one of the names. And my high school friends, when I told them what I decided, said, "Who do you think you are? What are you doing?" But it was such a good experience. I came back full time 2 years later. Again, similar to what Emily had said, I had that internship experience and knew that it was a place that I enjoyed being and would be supported and have lots of opportunity to do interesting things. And then I think what happens with small companies often is they get acquired, and now I'm part of a bigger company. And it's been just very interesting. I think I've gotten very lucky with the pace where we've grown up as a company and gotten a lot bigger as I've grown up as well. So I'm not the same person that joined APT fresh out of graduation. And there's a lot I've gotten to meet people around the world, engineers from around the world that I definitely would not have gotten to meet at the smaller company, but I still had all those opportunities right off the bat, right out of graduation, because we were so small. So that turned out to be a great fit for me.
Great. That's a good segue into the next question that I have. So I think one of the ways that CMU helps in that regard is lots of companies come to CMU, both for internships and full-time recruiting. But it's also the case that I think a lot of students at CMU help other students by building a network, if you will, right? So current students know students who graduated, and can give you a bit of an insight into what places are good given certain interests. Did you leverage any of the networking opportunities that CMU or its students provided? And can you maybe share an example of how that might have helped you either decide to do something or not to decide to do something? Perhaps if it's the latter, maybe you don't want to name that company by name, but just some ways that you might have leveraged, either alumni or CMU networking to figure out, what to do and how to do it.
I can take a crack. The benefit of going on Carnegie Mellon, especially this program, is there will be people in most companies that went to CMU, unless it's a very small company. And so by the way, this happened. I reached out. You just reach out to them. It's much easier now to do that in 2020 than it was in 2006. I can assure you. But just cold reach out to them. Say you're a SCS major or you're from Carnegie Mellon. Ask them for old days you used to do a cup of coffee. Maybe now it's a Zoom thing, but ask to meet up, and chances are your hit rate's north of 50%. You'll be surprised how receptive people are to talk, and that'll give you a great insight into what it is like to work there, and also insight into how best to position yourself, when you apply. So I would definitely do that. I know it's a little strange. It was definitely strange for me. It's not, something that came naturally, but if you just put yourself out there, you'll be surprised how receptive it is. So that I'd encourage people to do that. And I know when I get it incoming, I try and respond as many times as I can. So definitely leverage the name and the brand, to try and do that.
I can add a little there. So I think there's a great resource that CMU students have. It's the CMU Alumni Advisor Network. It's I'm forgetting the website, but it's essentially cmu.firsthand.co. Yeah. Okay, 100 points to me. So that's a great way to reach out to alumni who will want to give you advice in your career decisions, or just what courses to take, which areas to explore, how to go for internship. And plenty of students have reached out since last year, and when I meet them, just to see what they can do. One meeting can be much valuable than trying to find people on LinkedIn, because there's a direct way. The second thing is LinkedIn is great as long as you just don't add people. Press the add button and what the hell am I supposed to do with this, right? You need to write a message saying why you are reaching out to make that personal connection. So do that. Never add somebody without a message. Number 3, still don't ask hey, I need an internship, I need a job. No, it's better to ask for, hey, I'm looking for guidance in XYZ in roles like that. Could you say what I could do in man? I'm a CMU undergrad. I think those kind of meaningful connections where there's a long-lasting relationship does help. And then, when you graduate, pay it back forward to, people who are looking for, opportunities. And this is something that almost everybody should do. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, a lot of alumni come back when we used to hold the TOC in person, right, to both visit the campus and do exactly that. So come back to their roots and help recruit for their companies. And I think it's one of the strengths of the TOC model and the Let's Talk program that Catherine Kapitas runs. Okay, so I want to remind the people who are in the Zoom that you can actually submit questions and they will be routed to me. And so I am happy to take questions from the floor, but I'm also happy to make up things as I go along. And so I'm going to do another one. So given that we've talked a little bit about transition now into the workplace and how you do that, and how some of what you did at CMU course-wise informed that, what's the most important risk or interesting risk that you took either at CMU or post CMU, and why did you take that risk? And I think Margaret maybe already alluded to this a little bit, in going for the small company versus the big company. But what did you learn from it? So maybe someone other than Margaret to start this one off.
Well, I took a big risk for the wrong reason, which is I transitioned from a computer science job to a non-computer science job. The reason was I took OS and networking. I didn't take it together, but I took it kind of back to back. And I was done with programming for I just didn't want to touch a computer for 6 months, but I just started this job right after school. So I was like, let me try this other thing for 6 months and see how it goes. And 15 years later, I'm now continuing to do it. So it was a bit of risk out of exhaustion, but it turned out okay.
Who was your advisor? Who let you do those 2 courses simultaneously?
I don't know. He should go unnamed.
Any others who took a risk? Good.
Briefly describe one. Back in 2002, it was shortly after the 9/11 attacks. I was at that point in my life around 24, 25 when I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to go back to graduate school or not. And so, a friend of mine had told me about opportunities over at the FBI. And at the time I was working for a biotech company here in the New York metropolitan area. And I was really enjoying that role, had a great job and some great prospects. But, I decided to put an application in the mail to apply for the special agent job. And I didn't think anything would come of it. And so I went through the selection process. And then eventually it got to a point where I had to make a decision and pursue that opportunity, and really walked into a tremendous amount of unknown. But, with that one risk, I was able to open up the doors to a career that I would never, ever imagine, with a mission that I truly loved. And, and that risk ended up turning into an amazing experience for over 16 years. And then, I took one more set of risks that was even more, a little bit more important, at a later age. Just last year when I walked away from the FBI, which is an especially painful decision, but it was because of an opportunity that I really had to weigh heavily on. And that's the reason why, I decided to move on from the FBI. But, so there are going to be some times in your life that you're going to have to make these risks. You're not going to know how it's going to go, but, like everyone's kind of talked about, everyone on this line from the School of Computer Science and from Carnegie Mellon has the luxury of being able to take risks. And if you fail, you still have some backups to go back to.
That's great. It actually bears on something that I often tell students in their senior year, and when they're trying to wrestle between something that may seem out of band, like your stint with the FBI, or maybe some weird startup that no one's ever heard of. And I tell students who are graduating that they are their most risk tolerant when they're leaving the university, right? They don't have a lot of external responsibilities, a spouse, a house, kids, etc. And if the thing, whatever it is, isn't your thing, right? Okay, so any company that's willing to hire you, at this point is going to be willing to hire you a year from now, right? But the opportunity that you may lose may not reappear a year from now. And so I think, Prashanth, you're living proof of the things I try to tell my students. So that's nice reinforcement to me as an advisor. I want to ask a question that just came up in the chat, or in the submitted by audience members. So, and it sort of bears on some of the things we've been talking about in terms of what CMU is. And so I'm just going to read the question verbatim. Students obsess over grades, although now I'm going to throw in my take on this. It's also student parents who obsess over grades, but let's leave that aside for now. Given your experience, meaning the alums, what is your view of how important grades are? Are there things that might be more important than grades in terms of professional success, let alone happiness? Feel free to take forever to answer this one.
I can take a stab because I actually was one of the lowest recorded persons in CMU's, at least in my class history, to get admission there. So I'm kind of proud of that. So my take on is, maybe let me talk from the point of recruiting when a resume comes in front. There are two parts of evaluating a resume. One is I'm trying to find some sort of an inner exceptionalism in the candidate, that this person actually loves the thing that they do. That's why they are in this profession, instead of oh, I'm studying this because I can get a job if I study this. There's two ways. And if you find that the person is genuinely passionate about something, they will figure out how to get stuff done. They don't, they will be there to learn things. And so if I can see some great projects, showcase on GitHub, chances that that individual will receive a call for the interview will be much, much higher because, there are like thousands of resumes these days that can come for a particular role. So I think if that would be one angle to say. Now, the problem is that when you graduate out, everybody is like, I'm a graduate from Carnegie Mellon. How do you differentiate between each other? Okay, GPA is a great, don't have terrible grades, but have like in the decent quartile, but then showcase some of your projects to really, showcase your work. If Emily did not work in robotics, she had not built projects, I think showcasing her candidature to JPL would have been a harder thing if it were just courses that someone would have done. So I think that's what I would say.
I know all your QPAs. I know where the bodies are buried. So don't make me pick on you by QPA order.
I will say, well, unfortunately, at least in my opinion, JPL and all of NASA has a minimum GPA requirement of 3.0. And I know some other aerospace companies do that too, like SpaceX has 3.5, which I think is absurd. But I will also say that I have many, like multiple friends from SCS and CMU who had 2-point-something GPAs and worked at top 5 companies. So it's definitely like, I think you can be able to do what you want regardless of what your GPA is at the end of the day. And yeah, I'll also say like, but the grades in your classes don't necessarily matter as much as whether or not you do take those classes. Like when I actually had to interview for the rover planner job, like within JPL, and which was an interesting process because it's not exactly the kind of thing they expect you to know how to do already. But one of the things I brought up was like, oh yeah, I went to CMU and I took a bunch of robotics classes there, and so like I have this robotics experience, and that I think that really helped me get the job with them because, well, one of the lead rover planners was a CMU graduate also, and they were like impressed that I had this robotics background already, and they didn't care what my grades were in those classes. I couldn't even remember, and like I don't even think I could tell them. But like the fact that I even took the classes at all mattered, and I think like that kind of thing really shows up to people when you like try to like show them your resume or whatever.
So I think if SpaceX has a 3.5, everybody at least ought to know what Elon's QPA was.
Not to throw shade, but
no, not at all. I think there's a lot of truth in what these students are saying, and I'm glad they're saying it because once again, having graduated a lot of students, I'm well aware of some students whose QPAs were north of 2, but south of 2.5, who have gone on to incredibly productive careers. And one of them in particular, who I cannot name either by actual name or by any oblique reference that could identify this person, was really good at one thing. And this is, to Anirudh's point. And that's where he's shown. And even though he wasn't really good at a lot of the rest of the curriculum, that's what he demonstrated and ended up working for a top 3 company in a very senior position, making things that people use a lot. And I'll leave it at that. But the key is to demonstrate facility and expertise in at least one thing deeply. And if you can do that, right, a lot of the rest of the stuff is at the margins. But a lot of this also bears on another question that's just come up. And so I think I'm gonna move to that, and then we'll take another couple questions in the docket. So obviously we're talking about grades, and part of that is related to CMU's rigor and the fact that unlike a certain red brick institution that's located in Boston, the modal grade for our graduating seniors is not 4.0. So given our rigor and given the time that everything takes, and given the desire to succeed and thrive, what would your advice be on how to offer students the best ways to execute the trade-offs between sanity and depth and breadth and all of the curricular things that you all have to manage? You've all walked this walk.
I'd say this is not what I practice, but I'd say in terms of advice, it's kind of what Anirduh was saying. It's like, just do what you enjoy. Don't optimize for, what will look best on a resume. It'll solve itself. As long as what you don't enjoy is sleeping all day. Like, do whatever it is that you enjoy. If it's robotics, go deep into robotics. If it's something else outside of CS, do that. And by the way, if you do that, like, there's a certain minimum IQ level if everyone gets admitted. I guarantee you that. if you marry that with what it is that you enjoy, the grades will follow. When the interview comes, because of the grades, the passion and what you have in that particular field will show up, and then the job will come. And after that, the grades don't matter, right? And so I would just over-index to what it is that you like. We live in a world, luckily now, where virtually everything you can make some money on, if you're truly passionate about it. So I would over-index to that. And so if you love something, go deep in it. If you love categories of things away from CS, I would go deep into that too. I know, Mark, that helps answer the question, but.
That's good.
I want to add on to that, because I also am a big believer in do what you enjoy, but I'd also want to add that I'd say don't feel pressured to only enjoy like computer science related things. Like, I feel like at CMU, a lot of students end up feeling pressured to do like only computer science related things, only hackathons, only like SCS related clubs, in addition to their major. And because it looks like they think it'll look the best on their resume, or like maybe they just want to be sunk deep into that world. But I really recommend doing things at CMU in an extracurricular way that are not related to CS. Like, for me, I spent a lot of time at CMU doing things for AB Tech, which is the Activities Board Technology Committee. And like, that was like my outlet almost for like, just like to get away from the CS world for a while. But at the same time, I really, really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot of like leadership skills that are useful now. But I wouldn't say like any of the actual skills that I learned, like how to coil a cable, is generally useful in my day-to-day job. But I definitely enjoyed it a lot. And I think it made my life better. I think it made my resume look better, because I had a lot of leadership things come out of that. And like, I could talk about it in interviews. Like, I led this club that did a bunch of cool stuff. And so I think that's really important too. Like, I would say try to get away from the like hackathon, CS club, whatever world, and like try to expand and do things you like too, because that also will look good for you.
I can add some more things. So, you're in CMU, so by definition, you are an overachiever, in the admission landscape. And overachievers have one problem, that they try to do too much too quickly and just stress themselves out. And this is the time to bring my favorite character, Ron Swanson's quote, don't half-ass many things, full-ass one thing. So it's better to go slow, steady, really understand the content you are going through, instead of trying to take more things too quickly, and then sort of not becoming an expert at all these parts.
So I have a quick follow on, because while I agree in principle that doing what you enjoy is key, as you all know, there's a stripe in the curriculum that you probably didn't enjoy, and that you probably, maybe it's more than that. Maybe you actually actively detested doing that particular stripe. So what would you tell students about that, right? Like, we have these various buckets that you have to do. And, there are ways, that are less stressful, more stressful to do them. But at the end of the day, you may not like to do systems, or you may not like to do theory, or you may not like to do whatever. So talk a little bit about how you coped, maybe not in particular, but in the main, with a piece of the curriculum that you didn't enjoy, didn't think you would enjoy, and how you managed to push past that. I only ask the tough questions.
I mean, I wasn't a great systems guy. Never enjoyed it. It never really sort of appealed to me. And so doing 100 hours a week on, building a freaking kernel was not my idea of fun. But, by the way, that's life. Like, I like my job today, but like, there's elements of it that, I don't like. And And by the way, like, you know, many of the jobs people have, like you will have weeks, by the way, months maybe, where you're just working those types of hours, and having that experience in college and knowing what you're capable of is valuable. So like there are lessons to be learned. You may not think you enjoy it, you probably don't enjoy it, but you will still learn from it. And so I would just embrace that and you know, power through.
Yeah, I've been struggling with what to say with any of these questions. I think one thing that was hard for me for a couple of semesters that sort of brought me down a lot was trying to do too much undergraduate research, because I thought that's what I was supposed to be doing, and I thought I was going to enjoy it. And I tried to do it for several semesters, and every weekend it would be this thing hanging over my head that I thought I had to do. But I am glad that I stuck with it long enough to be confident in saying no. And I think it's important to, I guess, be able to recognize when it's too far, and maybe when you don't expect to be crying in a professor's office at the end of the semester, it's gone too far. I didn't realize it until then. But I took that as a sign and said, I'm going to do something different next semester. I'm just going to cut this off and go back to something that I'm excited about. And that was long enough. So.
Good. I think those are two really good answers. And having seen a bunch of students either crying in my office or having told me they cried in a professor's office, I can relate. All right, let's pivot to a different question that came in the chat. And this is, how did you know you were ready to move on from your first job? Now, for some of you, you've been in sort of your job forever, but you know, Prashanth, you in particular had a very big transition. So how did you know it was time, or was it just that the particular opportunity, you know, presented itself, and whether it was time or not, it was just too good to pass up?
I think for my first job, and it kind of goes back to earlier about the whole networking concept. You know, I when I graduated from CMU, I first started off at PricewaterhouseCoopers doing consulting, and this was back in 1999. It was right around the time of the dot-com days. And so I got a phone call from one of my close friends from Carnegie Mellon, and he said that they were looking for, you know, for some folks to fill some technical roles at a startup. And so that's when I made my first, you know, big leap, and, you know, leveraged again the CMU network, which is incredibly important. And, you know, going back to that last question, you know, one of the things you can do during your undergrad right now is just really develop your network of friends and people that you're going to be around, and step away from the schoolwork, because I can't tell you how important that's going to be as a support line for you as you go through just life and need, you know, personal support. There isn't a week that goes by when I don't leverage one of my close friends from undergrad. So sometimes you make a decision to move on from that first job. In that case, that first job at Pricewaterhouse wasn't as tough as my time at CMU. In fact, it was kind of boring. And that's why I decided to go to a startup where I could wear a bunch of different hats and be thrown into a chaotic mess and learn something from it. And I learned a lot in that short period of time. And I stayed there for a couple of years before I moved on to another company.
Anybody else want to take this one?
I can go. I actually forgotten the question because the answer was so good.
So how do you change jobs? I mean, I can't ask Emily because Emily's still in her first job. So like,
cool. So I'll say, you know, watching others at what time they have been changing jobs, as well as I think I'm in my fourth company at this point. I think the good way to assess is that are you really enjoying and maximizing what you can potentially do? You know, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, you'll constantly be trying to do more. And that's good because you'll be like, you know, pushing the boundary. And sometimes, you know, you get limited in the scope of what you can do. And maybe that's one transition point that you might see for your career. So that's one way to look at it. In my case, I think I had the opportunity to double down on the area I believe will be you know, in the blind community. So that's why I left Microsoft to go into that particular area. So I think that was my calling, or if I actually really needed a job, you know, that was my other time. So to go to CMU, I was working before coming to CMU. I tried to study and work. Oh boy. lost a lot of weight. So I left the job and just came, like, I'll just study full time here. The other way I have seen is, I will say that in some bigger companies, or even in like companies which are growing, you're not bound to your thing that you are doing. You can always be exploring what could I else be doing in my company. I've seen plenty of people who are in data analytics and become product managers or software engineers to product managers. Companies like the FANG companies, Microsoft, where Pulkita is in right now. It's like one company with multiple small companies, and you could be joining any product and looking for opportunities. So a really good way to get that growth is to search for opportunities maybe every 2 years of what's in my own company, because I'm already familiar with it. The time it will take somebody to like start knocking off the balls would be very quick. So that's another way of looking at opportunities. So you don't have to go out. I think the key thing we are talking about is looking for the opportunity, which can be just somewhere around you. I will also say one quick thing, which is you don't need to change a job to find new opportunities. So a lot of people, they excited about computer science and they work in open source in their evening weekends. They are really passionate about something. They will not pay them money, but it will probably build you a repute, or like, oh, you are one of the core contributors to XYZ. So that is another way of building your expertise, which eventually in time, you'll get paid back for that.
Okay. These all seem like very reasonable answers, and these are, at least for hopefully many of the students, a number of years out before they have to make that transition. So here's looping sort of back into the curriculum and how to manage the CMU experience. A question from the chat is, did all of you know what you wanted to do? And I think the answer for Emily is yes. In which area of computer science when you came to CMU? If not, how did you decide what part of CS to go into? And what do you think the best way is to find the area of CS that, to use Anirudh's term, just clicks, right? Is the thing that you really are passionate about. The curriculum is pretty wide. So how do you figure out what area is yours?
I can break the wall.
All right, I will allow you to do this one more time, and then I'm going to start calling on people.
Well, you already answered for me, so I don't know what I can say.
Point taken. Good.
I think it's a lot about that buffet that you want to sample to know what's out there. So I think one key thing being in a lot of fields, generally in undergraduate, when you're learning, is you don't know what you don't know. So I think the first thing is to familiarize with the areas. Go to these alumni meetups. Go to the job, the ECB, the TOC. TOC. Thank you. So go to the TOC and like sample what's out there, what kind of things are happening in the world, what's happening. Subscribe to newsletters to kind of know. You don't need to know about how to train AI models to know what's actually happening in the news in AI, to kind of be inspired by what is the state of art right now. So I think that is a good motivator. And once you start getting motivation of what's possible in this area, connect with the people, then you can, take a small bite instead of like going all in to get a sample of it. So I think that sampling is probably really important. I found that I get excited about doing something funky with data. So that kind of became my career now. That's what I would say.
I can actually add more onto this too. Yeah, I think the sampling is really important. You can do that through like taking different classes, getting internships at different places. I was like, of course, I did know what I want to do when I came to CMU, but the fact is I was lucky enough to actually get it right. Like a lot of people come in thinking they know what they want to do, and then it turns out like that actually doing it isn't very interesting to them at all, and like they're left kind of floundering, wondering what it is they actually want to do. So I think it's important to like take the classes you think you're interested in. If it turns out it's not that great for you, then well, good. There's plenty more classes, and if you do it early, there's more time to like figure out what that thing is. I think interning at different kinds of places is very important also. Like I could have just worked at JPL for 3 years for internships, but instead I decided to go and work at a couple of other places to see what it was like there. And I think like doing research is important. A lot of people encourage that. Like a lot of there's a lot of different things you can do at CMU to figure out what it is you exactly want to do. And you kind of just got to try them all and see which one works best.
Yeah, no, I would echo that completely. I wanted to do video game design when I came in. I had no idea what that meant. It just sounded cool, felt cool. Took one class, never want to do it again. And also, like, I think, I actually think the CS program, it's different from what it was in 2006. Like, it's become a lot more specialized now, which I actually think is a little bit of a mistake. Like, I'd rather, we should force people to make yourself a little uncomfortable, take stuff you don't know if you like, sample a bunch of stuff. You'll be surprised what clicks. And it's a bit of what Anirduh would say, you don't know what you don't know. It's Emily, I think, would be in the minority. It's hard to have people come in at 18 or 19 and know exactly what they want to do. If it is, great. It's the best place to do that. Go deep, and figure it out. But if you don't, that's perfectly okay. Like, that's the point of a college education, is to sample it and see what clicks.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so I got two more questions. So both from the chat. So the first one is, grad school, at least at the master's level, requires a couple of years and a huge cost in tuition and potential lost income. For the record, PhD programs, to all of you in the call, are fully funded. So PhD programs do not cost you money, but they do cost you time. Given how high-paying entry-level jobs are, how should a soon-to-be graduate student weigh the trade-offs between diving into the job market now or first going for a graduate degree? In particular, are there opportunities at your company that would only be open to applicants with a master's or PhD? Good, Prashanth.
To that pretty well. If on the arc of my career, I would definitely say that if there's an opportunity for you to go to graduate school while working and having your company pay for it, I would highly encourage you to do that. I was fortunate to have the FBI pay for 2 graduate degrees while I was working for full time. The first time, that was where I was single and I had an opportunity to overload and plow through that in 2 years. And then again, fast forward to the last time when I went back to CMU, this time I had a newborn baby. But I walked out with a set of credentials that I could keep forever. I walked out with no debt. And I think that if you have an opportunity to have your employer sponsor it, you might there might be a little bit of a payback period associated with it, but I think that you'll be in a much better position. And personally, I think you have a really great story to tell because it also shows that you're able to multitask and do two things at the exact same time. And it also shows a level of commitment that a lot of people, frankly speaking, in the workforce don't bother doing because they either did graduate school and then went to work full time. It's a lot harder. And when we're talking about prospective candidates, I'm always looking for someone who's got a great story to tell.
That seems to be a theme, a recurring theme, right? Have that thing that you can talk about that's you. So, okay, can we get another perspective on grad school or not from any of the panelists? And then I'll move on to the last question.
So I did go to grad school, so I can,
Yes.
get. I literally, as a kid used to watch Dexter's Lab, like with the PhD code. So my dream was to do a PhD. Like that was like, what are you talking about? Before that, we are not even talking. And ironically, I have taken out so many potential PhDs out from the program and into industry. So I found my personal calling to be doing research, but to build a product instead of just to publish a research paper. So transitioning from undergraduate to graduate, the best way to think about is you are specializing deep into a particular area, trying to understand the state of the art and potentially starting to get near the state of the art to make a contribution to push the levels of the boundary. And that's what you do then in PhD, right? But I have found, these days in AI, opportunities have started which are PhD only are now masters. But if you are an undergraduate with a research thesis, you are great because a lot of the things are just open and public and research papers are readable now. So I wouldn't say that it's like necessarily you have to be a master's for several areas these days. But it's a great way if you want to specialize even further and get deeper into either research or some professional skills that you just can't get outside. This is a good equation. I think the cost you are paying to the time you'll be spending to do that, and Prashanth answered it really well. But if you are going to go full time, to do if it's like a deeper research part, I think the payoff can be well if it is like something which you are going out in a new field. A lot of people who go to the MBA school actually change their career direction, and it pays them off eventually. So it's not the current issue, the current that you're losing, but the future that you'll be gaining. So it's an ROI thing.
Okay, so the last question I'm going to want everybody to give a short answer to. We're going to just go whip around the 5 panelists and just answer at will. So this was also in the chat. There's lots of great advice here for students, but here's a twist. So through the lens of your experience, both as a student and now in your career, what advice might you give to CMU faculty to help us be even more effective toward our current and or future students? You didn't expect that one, did you?
I mean, I would say, maybe just hitting on the themes we've discussed, like I would go in a particular class, I would keep that rigor really hard. Like you should use that opportunity to learn as much as you can about that particular field. And then, at the advisor level or at the kind of macro level, I would do some of that diversity that we just talked about in terms of making sure you're trying different things. You're not optimizing for resume. You're not optimizing for, one or two things, and, do lots of things. Just when you do them properly. And that's, I think, where Carnegie Mellon does really well. Like each of the classes are world class. The professors are world class. Like let's not compromise on that. Just make sure you're taking a good sampling of that to get the best experience.
Next up.
Yeah, I guess I don't know who's next, but I'll go next. I guess I'd say I think about who are we giving awards to and lifting up, who's getting whatever award, Carnegie Association. When those people get selected, does everybody know they have the top GPA? In which case, then we're optimizing for grades, and people will take classes or not take classes based on what grade they think they're going to get. I can speak to that. That's why I was struggling with some of the earlier questions. I think the people that we lift up and give these awards to and promote publicly, that's what we value and what people optimize for.
If it's advice to the faculty, it would usually be, stay nice and motivate with practical examples before teaching. So I think many great teachers already do that, but like showcase what is the state of art you can achieve if you actually study this, and then start running through, as Ashwin said, like bring that rigor high. I'll very quickly say there were a few classes where I was, like being challenged well, till the last day of the class comes, where the exam was actually not about the nitty-gritty details, but what did you actually try to apply the concepts that we studied into, like at the high level. And then I kind of realized the journey that we took with the teacher for all these months. It was not actually the nitty-gritty, but how can he challenge our critical thinking? So I was grateful because that actually became my career direction.
Okay, Emily and Prashanth.
Well, okay. I think it's important for faculty to be like supportive and understanding of the student experience, especially. I feel like it might be difficult for faculty professors who've been in their position for a long time and teaching and dealing with a lot of different faces and a lot of different students to really understand what it's like to be a student and to be learning all of this stuff essentially for the first time. A lot of students are like, I know I had no idea what computer science was before I got to Carnegie Mellon, looking back. But I think rigor is important, but also like being empathetic and understanding of the struggling that the students are going through is also important, and what it's like to be a student today. And I think like just like showing your students that you actually like care about their success, like even though a lot of them end up just being faces in a crowd, I think that's really important for professors to do, and it makes them more approachable for students who like need further help or understanding with the class.
Last one, Prashanth, you're going to close us out, and then I'm going to go back to Pulkita.
Very much. I would just say, kind of piggybacking what Anirudh said, it was about having some practical advice to dole out in addition to some of the material that's covered in class. I still remember Professor Edco, the late Professor Edco, who provided some practical advice to all the engineering students about how things were actually in the working world, like making sure your belt matched the shoes that you wore, make sure that you showed up on time for meetings, or make sure that your tie, the bottom of your tie for men hit the middle of your belt buckle. Some really, really practical things that had nothing to do with school that actually have some meaning when you leave an academic setting. So, and just having some fun. I think that the people who have made it into Carnegie Mellon's computer science program have already proven themselves academically. They can do anything that they want. It's now just having a little bit of fun and having some empathy towards it, because as Emily had mentioned, this is going to be such a unique part of your life. And there's so many stressors that are going to come inside your life. And you just want some fun while you're there for that 4 years, because it'll mark the rest of your life probably. So
I think that's a great way to end, and I'm now going to send it back to Pulkita to close us out. Thank you all.
Yeah, wow. That was truly remarkable. I don't know about you guys, but I have goosebumps. I'm so honored to have gone to the same university as all of you. Thank you again, panelists, for sharing those stories and providing us with a raw look behind your journeys. So thank you. And to the current students, we hope this conversation will help you as you navigate your college careers and beyond. We hope that you now have a better idea of the endless opportunities that truly exist for you. So on behalf of the Alumni Association Board and the School of Computer Science, thank you to everyone who joined today and to everyone who helped make this event possible. Special shout out to Armand, my partner in crime, for helping with this event, David Cosby for the inspiration behind this event, and to Katie Morris and Jenny Bellardi for helping plan with all of the details for this event. This evening's panel was recorded and will be posted on the School of Computer Science's YouTube page in about a week. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future events, please shoot me or Katie an email. Any and all ideas are welcome. These events are for you, so your input here is truly invaluable. We want to make it catered to what you guys would like and to see in the future. So please shoot us any suggestions and feedback. We're open to anything, and we don't bite, I promise. So thanks again, and happy Wednesday, everyone.